This is a WGBH News special presentation. The Massachusetts gubernatorial debate between incumbent Governor Charlie Baker and challenger Jay Gonzalez. Live from our Brighton studio, here are our moderators, Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan.
Good evening and welcome to our audience here at WGBH, to everybody who's watching or listening at home on 89.7 and WGBHnews.org, as well as our sister stations, WGBY in Springfield and WCAI on Cape Cod. With under 3 weeks until the election, we really hope the next 60 minutes will help you decide whom to vote for governor of Massachusetts.
Now, Marjorie obviously sees this as just a debate. We know many of you see it as the Red Sox pregame show. Regardless, let me explain the rules for tonight. There are no rules. No opening statements, no closings, no time limits, although we will be keeping track of speaking time to keep things relatively even. And we want to cover a lot of ground, so brevity is appreciated. Feel free to talk to each other as well. In fact, we encourage it. And since we're asking our studio audience not to applaud during the debate, we'd like to take a minute to give Charlie Baker and Jay Gonzalez a hand right now. Please do that. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it. Marjorie, take it away.
Governor, we'll start with you. It's not just rush hour anymore. Everybody's stuck in traffic all the time now. 2 years ago, Northeastern did a study that talked about cars already crawling at 10 miles an hour on Route 3 during the commute, and more cars coming. Before you know it, we could be at a total standstill. So have you done enough about this issue, considering the fact that the legislature approved this pilot program that would discount drivers who commuted outside of rush hour? You didn't want it, you said no, you wanted a study, but we've had an awful lot of studies, haven't we?
Well, I think the biggest thing we need to do, and as somebody who spends a lot of time in the traffic around the Commonwealth, I'm more than a little aware of that. I think the thing we really need to do is continue to invest in our public transportation system. We have an $8 billion investment planned over the next 5 years, which between the red line, the orange line, and the green line will increase capacity by about 50% during rush hour, which makes a huge difference. We've added 10,000 trips to the commuter rail over the course of the past 4 years, and can continue to build on that success and build capacity there. We're finally using designated bus lanes, which people have talked about for years, but we finally got some up and running and a whole bunch in the pipeline. And I think in many respects on the public transportation side, we simply need to do more to give people more options. With respect to the road and bridge piece, we're planning to spend another $8 billion on our roads and our bridges, and many of those investments are going to be geared to areas that I refer to as choke points. And those choke points, in many cases, create a big piece of the issue, especially around Greater Boston. And we're also going with expansion plans. I mean, we're basically going to build the Green Line extension into Somerville, which covers one of the most congested corridors on the eastern seaboard. And rather than waiting until 2030 to finally get around to doing something with respect to South Coast Rail, we redesigned the route, and we should have it finished and operating by 2025.
Jay Gonzalez, do you think the governor's done enough? And if not, are there 2 or 3 specific things you could mention that you think he should be doing?
No, I don't. And this is the issue I hear the most about everywhere I go on the campaign trail. We have one of the worst transportation systems in the country. As you mentioned, people in our state are sitting in traffic longer than pretty much any other state. People can't depend on our public transit system to get to work on time. So I've got a plan to deal with it. I'm going to ask the wealthy to pay $3 billion in additional revenue to invest in our education and transportation system. We have to be honest with voters that we need to invest more to get our transportation system to where it needs to be. We should try innovative things like the pilot program you mentioned to discount tolls during non-peak hours, and I supported that. But we need our public transit system to be one that people can depend on, so they want to get off the roads and use it. And we need to invest more in it to get to that place.
Governor, you want to say anything? I want to move ahead.
I don't disagree with him with respect to the fact that we need to invest more. I mean, our investments over the next 5 years between the roads and bridges and the public transportation stuff is about $8 billion more than we invested in the last 5 years of the previous administration. Yes, we definitely need to invest more. And we have a plan to do that.
You know, I'm going to get back to what you said a minute ago, Jay Gonzalez. You said we need to be honest with the voters. Are you being honest with the voters about that $3 billion? Yeah. $1 billion plus is a tax on college endowments.
Yep.
An expansion is something Donald Trump did that even Senators Markey and Warren said would hurt students. Your $2 billion additional, even if it cleared every single hurdle, wouldn't raise one nickel until your second term in office. Do you have a real plan that would raise real money in the short term to do the things you say he isn't doing?
It's a very specific plan to raise $3 billion each year by the end of my first term, which is $3 billion more than zero, which is his plan. And, you know, we're spending more now on the T, thanks to some decisions that Deval Patrick made to raise the gas tax and some others, but it is not nearly enough. The people across this state who use the T can't depend on it. It affects their quality of life every single day. Governor Baker's plan is that it's going to be fixed in 15 years, and he hasn't even said how he's going to pay for that. It's unacceptable. We need a sense of urgency around this.
Is there even one Democratic leader in the legislature that supports your endowment?
Yeah, Jamie Eldridge supports it, Michelle Wu.
I'm talking about people who are
Nobody has not supported it, and if I get elected running on this, that's going to be a mandate to do it. And you know what? We need public leaders that aren't going to do the same old stuff, the same old Republican playbook of no new taxes at any cost, and we're just going to have to get by with whatever we have. It's not good enough. We are not serving the people. We've got one of the worst systems in the country. It is affecting people's quality of life, and it's going to start dragging our economy back.
You want to respond to that, Governor?
Well, first of all, one of his own former colleagues called the tax on college endowments a spectacularly bad idea. And yes, it would come primarily from students and their families because it funds a big piece of scholarship and local aid and student aid money. But the other thing I would say here is the issues with respect to public transportation go back a long, long time. The investments that we've started, the first time the T ever spent $1 billion on its capital budget was this past year. I mean, they left $1.5 billion on the table that they didn't spend, the previous administration, that they couldn't even figure out how to get out the door. And I took the position early on that we were going to create a fiscal and management control board and try and make up for a 20-year lack of investment in what I call the core system, the system that moves 1 million people a day. And those investments in signals and switches and power systems and electronics and boring stuff like railroad ties and tracks and third rail, those are the things that are going to give you additional capacity and a reliable system.
Quickly, if you can, Jay Gonzalez, yeah.
It's status quo stuff. And we have to invest. There's no rational person who understands the T's budget who doesn't think we need more revenue. Governor Baker's very own commission that he put together when he became governor said reform isn't enough. We need to raise taxes to invest more. I am saying there's going to be a clear choice. I'm going to ask the wealthy to pay more in taxes so that we can make these investments that are going to make a difference for working families across this state who cannot depend on this system to get to work on time, and we have to do it. I am not running for governor to manage around the status quo. It's not good enough.
I want to stay on tax just for a second, Governor. If I describe to you a governor who imposed a $250 million assessment on employers to fund Medicaid and signed a bill with an $800 million payroll tax to pay for family and medical leave, would you say that person was a no new taxes governor?
No, I'd say that
you,
person was probably me.
Exactly. And so isn't it fair to say you have raised taxes significantly and you will raise taxes when you think it's appropriate? Isn't that a fair characterization of your first 4 years?
Well, first of all, with respect to the grand bargain, which is the issue associated with creating a paid family and medical leave program here in Massachusetts, that's a good example of a negotiated arrangement that took a couple of ballot questions off the ballot and made it possible for the Commonwealth to move forward on what I call a deal that people could live with. And I signed it because I thought it was a lot better than the ballot questions themselves. And it was a new program. And it was a program that was going to be funded the same way we fund workers' comp, the same way we fund unemployment insurance. And I think those programs stand on their own and they're funded on their own.
Is it an $800 million tax increase?
It's an $800 million increase to support that new benefit, yeah. But we inherited a big deficit. Everybody told us we were going to have to raise taxes to pay for it. We didn't, and instead we worked hard, we balanced the budget, we came up with smarter ways to deliver services, made big investments in all kinds of agencies and local services, and now we have a big surplus. And we just finished depositing almost $600 million into the rainy day fund.
Jay Gonzalez, the paid family and medical leave is a very popular program for a lot of people.
Yes, it is.
What do you think about the governor's way of doing it?
Well, I supported it from the beginning. The governor, thanks to lots of activists and legislators, it ended up on his desk. It happened in spite of him, not because of him. I would lead on issues like paid family leave that are going to make a difference for working people across the state. But we gotta make sure people understand the choice here on transportation, because what Governor Baker is offering is reducing funding for roads and bridges across the state, trying to reduce funding for regional transit authorities. And I'm glad Springfield, I heard you say, is carrying this debate because the governor refused to do a debate in Western Massachusetts or Worcester. And that the T will be in a state of good repair in 15 years. And he has not said how he's going to pay for that. I am being upfront with people. I'm going to ask the wealthy to pay more in taxes so that we raise $3 billion a year by the end of my first term, which is a significant amount of additional revenue that will allow us to get the T to a place where people can depend on it much faster than the governor, and that's the choice.
We have to move ahead if I can. Can we talk about energy for a second, Governor? In the past, you've supported construction of another gas pipeline. The other day at an environmental forum, you wouldn't answer the question. You said you'd rather focus on repairing existing infrastructure.
Yep.
With what happened in Merrimack Valley, the scare in Woburn, thousands of leaks, aren't the voters entitled to know, do you support an additional gas pipeline or do you not? Aren't they entitled to know that? What's the answer?
Well, I think what they should know is that I do believe the focus should be on investing and upgrading and modernizing and improving the quality of the existing infrastructure. And by the way, that's exactly the position I took with respect to the T. I mean, people for years talked about all kinds of things other than making the investments we should have been making in the core system.
Should there be a new gas pipeline?
Let me just finish. And we made them. And we have a plan to continue to invest in the core system. And those investments in the current infrastructure of the T are going to be what delivers a different product than the one people got used to for 20 years when no one spent the money they should have spent on the system.
Do you support a new gas pipeline?
We have a big study, independent study that's being done on our pipeline infrastructure, and that study is going to determine the condition of the current pipeline and the policies, procedures, and practices that should be pursued with respect to ensuring that it's safe. And I'm certainly not going to support doing anything with respect to any new pipeline until we actually get that study back and figure out what it tells us.
You're against a new pipeline. Why, Jay Gonzalez?
Yeah. He has supported him in the past. I've been against him because climate change is the biggest threat to our planet. And as we were just reminded in the Merrimack Valley, natural gas is very dangerous. The UN just came out with a report that basically said the threat from climate change is so much of a bigger threat and more urgent than we even thought. We're feeling the impacts today. The near-term impacts that are projected are scary. We have to oppose. I will strongly oppose and do everything in my power to keep the expansion of natural gas pipeline infrastructure from happening, which is just going to further our dependence on fossil fuels.
So how do you ensure that short-term energy needs are met?
Because we got to go much more aggressive on renewable energy.
Short-term.
We should be doing, well, new gas pipelines wouldn't be short-term either. That would take time to construct. We should be going all in, be much quicker in terms of the offshore wind development. We should eliminate these constraints that Governor Baker has put in place on solar development, which not only has slowed the development of solar in our state, but has lost solar jobs in our state. I'm going to provide bold leadership on this issue. There is so much we need to be doing to take this on, and we're not doing nearly enough right now.
Can I just point out that we basically delivered the largest offshore wind project in U.S. history, and it was that project that got people all the way up and down the coast excited about wind because it came in at a price point that shocked virtually everyone and made wind for the first time appear to be affordable and competitive with other sources of energy.
Isn't that true, Jay Gonzalez?
All these states up and down the coast are now on track to outpace us in offshore wind development. And it happened because the court made the Baker administration move forward with it. We need a governor who's leading on this. And the 800 megawatts that's on track right now is not enough. We've got to go quicker. We need to go bigger. And we can't afford the consequences of climate change that are happening now and near term. We need a governor that's going to take this on and fight to move us forward.
He's simply not correct when he talks about a court order made us do that. That legislation that made it possible for us to chase Canadian hydro and to build a procurement around offshore wind was a bipartisan initiative that we did in conjunction with the House and the Senate. And it is going to be the dynamic that changes the whole conversation about offshore wind. Nobody else up and down the East Coast was interested in doing anything in wind when it was just Cape Wind, because it was 5 times as expensive as any other available energy source.
Let's just talk about a quick thing having to do with this whole terrible situation up in Lawrence and in North Andover and stuff. National Grid, right in the middle of this whole mess, has got workers in a lockout. What do you do about that? They're not bringing those workers back in. How would you handle that?
I think they need to. I think the way they've treated the workers is reprehensible, cutting their pay, cutting their health insurance, locking them out, and it's created a lot of safety concerns.
What would you do as
politicians, including
I would have intervened earlier, much earlier, when this lockout happened, and tried to get the parties together to resolve this and get them back on the job. The governor, it took months for him to get involved in this. It's why a lot of National Grid folks were outside tonight rooting us on.
But you went up and tried to meet with the National Grid people to get them to ameliorate this situation. And they basically said...
Oh yeah, we've had lots and lots of conversations,
but it's
both with each sides independently, and we also brought them together.
But it's sort of amazing. It's kind of like you've met with them, other politicians have met with them, and we're kind of getting a big drop dead from National Grid in the middle of this tragic situation here.
They now have a moratorium on their ability to do anything other than statutorily required and emergency work. And I continue to believe that they need to bring those folks back. Now, we also talked to Columbia and the folks doing the restoration work up in Lawrence, North Andover, and asked them if they would be willing to offer work opportunities for everybody, or for as many people as they can take who are associated with the steel workers, and they did do that, and folks are meeting, and I'm hoping that a bunch of those folks will be able to start working on that.
Can we move on? Let's talk about the state police. Everybody knows there's been months of scandals involving the state police. Since the last debate, we've learned that 3 times this year, the state police asked to destroy more than 100 boxes, payroll, attendance, personnel documents. The first time they asked was 2 days after the Boston Globe reported that payroll records for an entire 140 trooper unit had been hidden for years. Governor, you stood behind the head of the state police, Colonel Gilpin. Can you tell us whether she ordered this records destruction? Did she know about the request? If she didn't, isn't she responsible for what you have called a mistake?
Well, I do think it was a mistake, and there's a process in place to determine when you can destroy records and you can't, and that process involves other independent entities, and they said no, but it was a mistake. But that said, the colonel is the one who led the investigation that ultimately led to the referral of 46 troopers to the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Attorney General for criminal prosecution. She's also the one who abolished Troop E, which is the troop that was responsible for virtually all of the bad behavior and the misallocation of resources associated with the overtime scandal. And she brought in Ernst & Young, which is a pretty well-known and well-respected financial services and accounting firm, to do a top-to-bottom review of their accounting, financial, and operational practices. She's doing the things that somebody should do.
Did she know about it when it was submitted? Did she order it? Was she aware of it at the time?
I don't believe she knew about it.
So it was kind of like rogue people who took this upon themselves?
It's standard operating procedure. It's just the machine running.
But in the middle of an investigation, it was kind of...
Okay, but remember, none of those documents were associated with any of the issues that have been raised by the U.S. Attorney or by the AG.
Well, some of them were through 2014, and the investigation is going back 6 years. So
no, I understand that.
Yeah, so some people just thought it was okay.
Look, I don't think they should have destroyed them, but they weren't part of the investigation.
Well, you've asked that the state police Colonel Gilpin be fired by the governor. So what else should the governor be doing about the state police? And if you're not happy with Colonel Gilpin, what else should she have been doing besides what the governor just said?
What you were just talking about, it was an attempted cover-up. These were relevant records, personnel records, attendance records. These are the very issues that go to the heart of the criminal activity and corruption that's going on at the state police. And it's been going on Governor Baker's watch. People who are indicted, people who pled guilty, criminal activity during the governor's tenure. And the first incident of this was reported 19 months ago, and they're just hiring someone to come in and look at payroll and personnel practices. When are you going to take charge? And you haven't fired a single person at the state police. When are you going to fire someone?
Replace the leadership team. Look, I think the most important thing about this is an investigation starts. Then you do the hard work associated with developing the case. And then once you finish developing the case, which is what happened here, the colonel gave that information to the U.S. Attorney and gave it to the Attorney General, as she should have. And the process associated with the records, I mean, I don't know about you, but when I think about intent, if somebody's actually trying to destroy records that they think are relevant to a case, they're not going to use the traditional process that's in place with all kinds of different independent entities with their eyes on it as part of that review.
So you think it was totally innocent on that
I do.
part? Just,
I think it was a mistake, but I don't think it was an intent to destroy relevant records.
The facts don't support that. Of course it was intentional. 2 days after the media report that you mentioned, and it's an attempted cover-up. Somebody should be going after the people who sent these records to be destroyed. This is 160 boxes of personnel and payroll and attendance records. And you said that the colonel didn't know that this was going on. I mean, I have absolutely no confidence that you and your leadership team have a handle on what's going on at the state police.
So what you would do is fire the colonel, and what else?
And you know, these cover-up incidents happened over the last one a month ago. I mean, the governor should be all over this. We should not only replace the colonel with someone from the outside who has the credibility and doesn't come from this culture.
You can't do
that.
that. The legislature says you have to
I would immediately ask the legislature to pass the law to allow me to do it, because we need someone with credibility from the outside who doesn't come from this culture of corruption, who in a very transparent way is going to get a handle on exactly what's going on over there and fix it. Because right now, nobody should have any confidence that the Baker administration and the governor have a handle on it and are addressing it.
Quickly, is there a culture of corruption at the state police?
I couldn't disagree more with that. Look, the colonel is the one who did the investigation that's led to every single indictment and every single plea that's happened since this whole thing began. She's the one with her team who followed the string, developed the cases, and submitted them to the appropriate authorities for criminal prosecution. She's the one that brought in an outside financial services firm to do a top-to-bottom review of the organization. She's the one that brought in Kathy O'Toole, a very well-respected manager and leader in the law enforcement community, to serve as a consultant to the agency. And she's the one who implemented the standard with respect to doing quarterly reviews associated with overtime, and she's the one that blew up Troop E, which is where the vast majority of the problems were.
15 seconds, Jay Gonzalez.
She's also the one who said she was going to do a bunch of reforms 6 months ago that haven't happened yet. She's the one who before worked at the state police and was responsible for auditing these overtime abuses and saw red flags and didn't pursue them. And she's the one that all these cover-up attempts happened under.
Is there a
and
culture
the fact
of corruption
she didn't
in
know
the state
about
police?
it is a problem.
There certainly was a culture of corruption at Troop E, and that's why it got abolished. But to paint a brush across 2,000 men and women who every single day serve the Commonwealth and serve the people of Massachusetts and support gang units and fugitive units and do a lot of the really important grunt law enforcement work that needs to be done here in the Commonwealth, I think is unfair.
Let's move to education. Governor, you have spoken often of the highest in the nation test scores, of funding goals met. A recent report called Number One for Some highlights, and I'm sure you've seen, a dramatic racial and income disparities. The one that stuck out for me is Massachusetts ranks second nationally in 8th grade reading for all students. Latino 8th graders rank second from the bottom in reading. These kinds of numbers, and there are many like that, haven't changed much at all in your 4 years. One, why? And two, did you not fail those kids in these past 4 years?
I think we have a lot of work left to do in education, and we've made progress in many cases. About half the kids who start as English language learning students get to the point where they're proficient enough in English, both reading and writing it, that they're no longer ELL students, and those kids graduate at just about the same rate as traditional students do. And
is the pace okay with you? I mean, these kids, I'm just talking about these 8th grade Latino kids, that generation is going to be lost, and then the next one. Is the pace, your pace adequate?
No, I think a couple of things I think we need to do. One is we need to set up acceleration academies, and we need to help pay for those. And put those, they've proven to be successful in places in Massachusetts and in other parts around the country, and use them as a device to help enhance kids who aren't making it and aren't getting it done, and they should probably start earlier than middle school with respect to those. We also ought to use after-school programming as a mechanism to create enrichment opportunities for kids in those districts, and we also ought to be really aggressive about professional development. One of the programs I think has turned out to be quite successful is the Empowerment Zone that they set up in Springfield, which I've tried to convince the legislature to do more of, so far without success. But that's a model that the teachers like, the administrators like, and has shown real progress in helping a lot of those kids improve their scores.
What do you do about those racial disparities, Jay Gonzalez?
It's a huge problem. The most fundamental responsibility we have collectively through government is to ensure that every single child has access to a great public education. And we are falling down on that job. And Governor Baker's been governor for 4 years now and made no progress on the fact that we have some of the biggest achievement gaps in the country. And the funding disparities for public schools are growing even bigger. So 2 things that are big priorities of mine that will address this. One, making sure child care and preschool is affordable and accessible to every family and child. It is proven to be game-changing, particularly for lower-income kids, in terms of their success in school and in life afterwards. And we need to fully fund our public schools. Both of those things are going to cost money. I have a plan to fund them, to raise $3 billion from the wealthy, to invest in education and transportation. And again, the governor's plan is zero. Continues with the same old stuff. Inflationary increases in education funding while we are underfunding a lot of the lower income school districts in this state. And we're letting way too many kids down.
But with all due respect, if I can, I asked the governor about losing a generation. One of the 2 taxes, again, has to pass court approval, legislature, and voters. And it's, excuse me, it's still 4 years. Well, if it's challenged, still 4 years off. And the other tax has very limited support. So the reality is the money's not really there for the reforms.
So I'm going to challenge both of those statements. Sure. If the millionaire's tax is initiated through the legislature, then the legal issue goes away. It was because it was a citizen's petition. So that would be 4 years. It would raise $2 billion. That's not soon enough. That's not, well, the legislature's already voted for it both times, and it's very popular. So I have confidence that will happen. The endowment tax, which would raise $1 billion now to get us started, while not popular from people who were mentioned before who work for Harvard and some of the universities,
we've gotten
a huge enthusiastic response from it because people understand we need to be investing in our education system and transportation system, and the status quo is not working for too many kids, and I will not let them down.
You know, we were just talking about disparities between poor towns and wealthy towns, and a great example is Brockton, where they can afford to spend $1.28 on class supplies versus Weston, where they can spend $275 per kid. The Democratic legislature failed to overhaul school funding, which hasn't been overhauled for years. So that was the Democratic legislature. You're talking about the legislature doing things, they couldn't even do that. So how could you convince them to do these other things if they can't even address that blatant disparity?
They also don't have a governor who's pushing them to. Governor Baker provided no leadership in trying to reform our education funding formula and provide new money to invest in education. And I will be a governor who does, because we have to. We can't afford to continue with the same old stuff. And I do have a specific plan, and Jim, I know it's controversial among some, but it's a plan. And Charlie Baker's plan is zero, and zero is not going to cut it.
Can I just respond to that? So his plan raises $1 billion now if he gets it passed, and $2 billion if he gets the next piece passed 4 years from now. Early childhood ed to everybody costs $1 billion. His plans associated with public transportation cost many billions, multiple billions. The education plan he's talking about is at least $2 billion a year and counting on top of that. And some of the other stuff he's talked about is huge money as well. The notion that he has put enough plans on the table to fund all the stuff he's promising and committing to simply isn't true. And that's not really governing or leadership. That's politics. And in addition to that, we have put the status quo administration, as he calls us, has put $110 million in new money into preschool. And we did that because we believe it's important to fund it. When he was the A&F secretary, he cut it by $85 million while he was raising state spending by $6.5 billion. One's rhetoric, the other's reality.
Is that true? All these numbers that he's throwing out are not true.
You didn't cut preschool. You didn't cut preschool.
Well, cutting preschool, yeah. I was managing during the worst fiscal crisis the state had ever faced.
So
at
it is
that
true.
time.
That's not true. $6.5 billion increase in state spending.
Not on
during
my
that
watch.
period.
Nope.
Yes.
Not while I was the secretary of A&F. That's not true. We had to cut funding, and versus the pre-recession budget. But here's the thing. Governor seems to be satisfied with where he is on early education and care. When I was managing the state budget, we were 20th in the country in terms of the amount we spent per child for pre-K. We've now fallen under Governor Baker to 37th. There are 12,000 families on a waiting list for state assistance for child care and preschool, and there are tens of thousands of families who aren't even eligible for state assistance, who can't afford it. It's not good enough. To me, that's unacceptable, and I'm not running to just keep the status quo going. I am running to ask the wealthy to pay more so we can make a difference for all these working families in this state who can't afford childcare and preschool.
One nice thing about
we put $100 million plus into preschool. He cut it by $85 million. That's all people need
Governor,
to know.
you in the first debate mentioned bipartisanship of the legislature repeatedly. You haven't mentioned it tonight. Legislature.
I actually did when I talked about the wind bill.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. You did. I did. I do remember it now. I stand corrected. This legislature went on a 5-month vacation with education reform not fixed. We can go down a litany of things. Are you okay?
The housing bill that I really wanted to get passed.
Are you okay
because
with
we need
them
to build more housing.
leaving for 5 months to do whatever they do?
The standard operating procedure for many years has been that they have a 2-year session, 18-month session, formal, and they don't come back after they finish their work in July
of
the second year. Well, the reason they did it was actually a reform initiative that came about as a result of some of the stuff that took place in lame duck sessions after elections.
Are you okay with
which
that?
I'm sure both of you guys remember well.
But would you rather they be there working on the issues you two are talking about, or out because of whatever reform they did years ago?
Oh, I would love to have them continue to work on this stuff, but I get the issues and concerns people have about lame duck sessions.
Okay.
You know, let's move on to relationships with your own parties. Governor, you've called the president disgraceful. You've disagreed on him on a whole bunch of stuff, from immigration to health care to confirming Justice Kavanaugh without a thorough investigation. Yet you've also endorsed the slate, the GOP slate in Massachusetts, which is confusing because so many of those people, including Jeff Deal, who's running for United States Senate, who ran Trump's campaign in Massachusetts, is on the other side of a lot of the issues that you are. So how do you...
And said he would vote for Kavanaugh.
That's right, he did say he would vote for Kavanaugh. So how do you square that, standing with candidates who support so much of what you oppose?
Well, I said during the primary season that I would support the ticket because a lot of people were concerned in the party that I would play favorites, and I chose not to. I have my own race to worry about, and I'm spending a lot of time working on state rep and state senate races as well. And I said I'll support the ticket, whoever comes out.
Regardless of what their positions on the issues are.
Well, people know where I stand on most of those issues, and I've always been quite clear about where I stand on a whole series of things with respect to the president, and have managed to work pretty hard over the course of the past 4 years to stop some of the things that the Congress and the president was proposing that would have been particularly damaging to Massachusetts. The Affordable Care Act cuts, the cuts in the NIH, and cancer and other forms of research, and a lot of the work we did associated with the travel ban and immigration, I think has proven to be
But
successful.
if you're successful and
if Jeff Deal were elected, and the Senate is very close, as you know, that could mean a lot of things in the future. With the Republicans have the majority, and another Justice Kavanaugh, or somebody even further to the right, or women's choice, all those things. Senators are in charge of that.
Well, that's why we worked so hard to make sure we passed access legislation for women's reproductive rights here in Massachusetts, and also cleaned up a lot of our old statutes with respect to abortion, and made very clear that whatever happens with respect to Title X funding at the federal level, we're going to continue to fund.
Doesn't
it
give you
here in
any pause, though.
Massachusetts.
Any concern that you're advocating for a person to go to Washington who will likely vote against the things that you say you believe in on the federal level?
Well, the people in Massachusetts want.
Yeah.
Well, what I worry about are the things that I can fundamentally control, and those are the things that have to do with what state government's up to. And when I can concentrate and invest in issues at the federal level, I chase them, and I chase them hard, and I work hard to build coalitions that ultimately end up being fairly successful.
I've just been told that Governor Baker's had roughly 2 more minutes than you have, Jay Gonzalez. We'll try to make it up. No, it's our fault, not yours. We'll try to make it up.
For him, Governor, are you going to vote for Jeff Deal?
Governor?
I'm going to vote for me, and I'm going to vote for Karen Polito, and I'm going to vote for a series of other candidates as well. I don't know what I'm going to do yet with respect to that one.
You don't know if you're going to vote for the guy you endorsed?
I haven't made a decision.
So you're asking people in Massachusetts to vote for Jeff Deal, and you're not even going to vote for him?
I said I was going to support the ticket, and I do.
But you may not vote for the ticket.
I'll make my decision eventually, and I'll make sure people know.
So why are you telling people to, I mean, to me, this comes down to clear loyalty for the Republican Party over someone supporting issues like pro-choice and women's rights and LGBTQ rights, which, let's be clear, Jeff Deal was the chair of Donald Trump's campaign in Massachusetts. He would be a rubber stamp for Donald Trump's agenda in Washington. and he would do everything in his power to undercut these very rights that you say you support. And you say you're clear on your position. It sounds like you're clear in asking the people of this state to send Jeff Deal to the United States Senate.
I'm very clear on my position on these issues, and I've worked very hard on them here in Massachusetts, and I'm going to continue to work hard on them here in Massachusetts.
Governor, you just said, you said before that you wanted to have a full investigation of Justice Kavanaugh.
Yep.
Many people think there was not a full investigation, but you also talked about having a full investigation when your son was accused of touching a woman in the airplane inappropriately. The U.S. Attorney's Office has jurisdiction, and they've said the only way to know the outcome of the investigation is if someone is charged. This happened in June, it's October. Can you tell us what, if anything, has happened then? And are voters entitled to know something about this so that they know that there was no favoritism because you're his dad?
Well, I can tell you that I haven't talked to anybody in the U.S. Attorney's Office about this issue, and I haven't talked to anybody at the state police about it either. And when the issue first came up, I said it was serious, that the allegations were serious, and that it should be investigated by the U.S. Attorney, which is a federal operation and a federal agency. They do have jurisdiction on it, and people should direct questions with respect to the status of that to them.
I did, and he said he wouldn't answer any questions, and the only way he'd speak on it was if it turns out that there's a charge against anybody. So are the voters entitled to know more? Or
my son's a private citizen, and I said it should be investigated, and I said he would cooperate.
Has the investigation been closed?
Again, you got questions like that, you should take them up with the U.S. Attorney.
You want to respond to that quickly?
I still can't believe that the governor's asking people in this state to vote for Jeff Deal and won't say whether he's going to vote for him himself. And, you know, I want to be clear about where I am on these issues. I will support a woman's right to choose and LGBTQ rights, not just some of the time, but all of the time. Not just reluctantly, but wholeheartedly, and not based on political calculation, but based on my core values. And I would never ask the people of this state or consider voting for Jeff Deal to send Donald Trump's co-chair to Washington to undercut all these rights. And you know, you can't have it both ways, Governor.
I have a long track record of supporting a woman's right to choose. I have a long track record with respect to women's health, reproductive health issues generally. I have a long track record of supporting gay rights and LGBTQ rights as well, and I consider those to be fundamental issues for me and fundamental issues for the Commonwealth.
Then why are you asking the people of Massachusetts to send Jeff Deal to Washington to undercut those rights?
We have to move on from this if we can. Speaking of where people stand on an issue, you're a pro-single-payer healthcare kind of guy there.
Yep.
Although we already have the lowest rate of uninsured, I believe, in this state. Health spending increases have been reduced, particularly in the last year. Plus, the one state that tried it, Vermont, a pro-single-payer governor, said we can't do it because in year one it would have doubled the size of the whole state budget. It would have required us to do, according to him, huge increases in taxes for residents and businesses. Why would it be any different here? And why won't you focus on just making what we have, which appears to be doing some good things, better, rather than embracing a proposal that could end up costing people billions that they don't have, Jay Gonzalez?
Because the system we have is not working for people. We have a high insurance coverage rate, but having health insurance coverage doesn't feel like having health insurance coverage anymore. With all the premium increases, co-pays, deductibles, you can't go to this doctor, you can't go to that hospital. It doesn't feel like coverage, and healthcare costs are crushing families and government and businesses. The system is way too complicated. We need to simplify it, and we need to save money. And going to a single-payer system will save us money. We'll cut a ton of administrative costs out of the system.
That's what Governor Shumlin said in Vermont.
Well, in Vermont, it's a different situation because they had a higher uninsured rate. It would cost a lot more to get everybody insured. We don't have that issue here. We're spending $61 billion a year in Massachusetts on healthcare. We're just spending it in a dumb way. I'm a former health insurance CEO who thinks we need to get rid of health insurance companies. And if we do this thoughtfully, this won't be a 5-minute thing, but if we do it thoughtfully, we will make sure everybody has access to the healthcare services they need. We will save money, and we will radically simplify the system. And the system we have today is not working for people, and it is not financially sustainable.
Do you want to respond to that, or I want to have another healthcare question?
There's zero evidence about everything he just said with respect to single payer. And the best evidence and the best example we have of a state that really took it all the way, which is not that big and not that complicated, is Vermont. And even they couldn't figure out how to get there. They couldn't even figure out how to get to a plan. And when you talk about something that's literally a $30 billion expansion in government spending here in the Commonwealth of Mass, which is what it's been determined to be by several folks who've studied it, that's just a profound change in literally everything. And most people in Massachusetts, while they all have issues and concerns about various issues associated with the healthcare system, they think the healthcare that they get and the care that's delivered here is appropriately among the very best you're going to find anywhere. And why you turn the whole system upside down for that, I just don't understand. Do we have issues with respect to prescription drugs? Yeah, and we should go after that and go after it hard. And we went after it last year. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get a proposal we made approved by the feds, but that's something we should go back to with the legislature and back to again with the feds.
Let's talk about another proposal that can affect both cost and access, and then we'll get back to you, Jay Gonzalez. A week ago, the largest hospital merger, I think in roughly 20 years in Massachusetts, cleared another hurdle. Critics claim that a merged Beth Israel and Lahey Health will increase costs and reduce access. Do you share their concerns, and where are you on the merger?
We've spent a ton of time with the Public Health Council and the Attorney General's office and the Health Policy Commission working through these issues. And the set of conditions that the Public Health Council put on this particular merger with respect to cost and access and performance generally with respect to serving underserved populations, I think everybody agrees are the most stringent and far-reaching ever that's been put on any merger in Massachusetts.
So do you support it?
I do support it at this point if those conditions are actually met, and they're pretty consistent with what the Attorney General's been talking about as well.
Do you, Jay Gonzalez, support the merger?
I don't in the system we have because it will give them undue market power and it will end up increasing costs. But if we go to a single payer system, I'm less concerned. They'll get the benefits of consolidation, being able to offer coordinated care for people without having the market leverage because there's just one payer. We need to get rid of health insurance companies. I was very proud of a lot of what my company did to connect our members to the care they needed. But most of what we did was facilitate a bunch of useless transactions. That's what every health insurance company does. There's tons of cost that we need to get out of the system. And this is another example of a big difference between the governor and myself. What I hear him saying is, why would we take this on? It's too hard. The status quo is, where we need to be. Let's make incremental change. The system is not working for people. It is way too expensive. They aren't getting access to the care they need. And to me, that's not acceptable. And this is a way to improve the system, to simplify it, save money overall. This won't cost $30 billion more. This will save money overall. And people will have access to the healthcare services they need.
This is 100%, trust me, on something that is so fundamental to the way people think about their lives and live their lives. And I got to tell you, when my opponent was the chair of the Health Connector, which at that point in time was supposed to be teeing up and implementing the Affordable Care Act and was serving 300,000 people here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, that thing cratered. And it stayed cratered for 2 years. And you had people who literally were on the way to hospitals to have babies who didn't know if they had health insurance. People who had medications and prescriptions that they didn't know if they could get filled, and they'd show up at the pharmacy and it turned out they didn't have coverage. And in the end, we fixed it after we took office, after literally 2 years of chaos for 300 or 400,000 people here in the Commonwealth of Mass. And I just don't think when you're talking about health care, you should be talking about it in such a flippant way. This is fundamental to people.
Give me a quick response, because we're going to move
on to that. This is not flippant. And of course, everyone in the Patrick administration who was involved with the Health Connector was concerned about the impacts it had on people. I left the Health Connector a year before the implementation of this. So, to blame me for something when I wasn't there and not take responsibility for things that are happening on your watch at the state police and elsewhere is a problem. But here's the thing. I'm not going to be satisfied with the healthcare system we have because it's not working for people. The number one issue that I get the biggest reaction to when I'm out on the campaign trail is to say that I'm going to get rid of health insurance companies and go to a single payer system, because people don't want to have to accept a system that is too complicated for them and where they're paying too much and they can't get access to the care they need. And I'm not being governor to just manage the status quo and hope to make it a little bit better. I'm going to provide bold leadership to get us to where we need to be to make a real difference for people, and it's not being flippant, it's called leadership.
Let's try to get through as many things as we can.
Let's just do a couple of quick ones here in the ballot questions. Jay Gonzalez, you support question 1, the one that would limit the number of patients assigned to nurses, and Governor Baker opposes it. So let's start with you, Jay Gonzalez.
Quickly, if you would.
Yeah, why are you in favor of this?
Because I lean toward patient safety. It's not perfect. As governor, I'd work with the legislature to tweak it if we need to, if it passes. But we're being given a false choice here, and it's a symptom of our broken healthcare system. We need to lean toward patient safety on this.
Why do you oppose it?
We have a higher nurse-to-patient ratio in Massachusetts than they have in California, which is the state people compare this proposal to. The implementation of it would be incredibly aggressive. It takes effect 55 days after it gets passed. The penalties are severe. The staffing requirements are really prescriptive, and it will put community hospitals, nursing homes, rehab hospitals, and psychiatric service providers at very grave risk. And for those reasons, I don't support it.
Okay.
It also adds $900 million to the cost of the healthcare system.
You both support the law protecting transgender people from discrimination and public accommodations. Governor, you did oppose it in 2010, called it the bathroom bill, and you signed it in 2016, but you did it kind of privately. I'm wondering if you're enthusiastic about this or kind of lukewarm about this, or what's the story?
I supported it, and I signed it, and I worked with the legislature on it to come up with legislation that everybody could support, and it ended up passing on a bipartisan basis, which I was proud of. I also support question 3. I think we should keep it, and I've donated to question 3.
You support question 3 as well?
I absolutely do. And the point about signing it in a room by himself, Maura Healey had to hold a fake bill signing ceremony so the people whose rights were protected by that legislation could celebrate the protection of their rights. I'm going to stand up for every single person in this state. I'm going to see everyone, hear everyone, and respect everyone, and operate from the heart on issues like this, and no one will ever question where I stand.
Why wasn't there a public ceremony, Governor, on that signing?
Some of it's just scheduling. We have public ceremonies sometimes we don't. I had a press avail right after that, at which I made very clear I was enthusiastic about the opportunity I had to sign it.
Let me ask you about Amazon and GE. The state and city kicked in about $150 million in infrastructure and tax breaks to get GE 800 new jobs to Boston. As we know, the company's had its troubles since then. So the question is, how far should we go in terms of tax breaks and other incentives to have Amazon HQ2 and its promised 50,000 jobs? And should we even want it, given the fact that all everybody seems to talk around about here is congestion and housing costs? That would, if they did come here, it would just send that through the roof.
Well, we've added 200,000 jobs to our economy over the course of the past 4 years and have more people working here than at any time in state history. And we also have a fairly big presence from Amazon. They have about 6,000 or 7,000 people here, and they just rented 1 million square feet for another 2,000 people. So Amazon's going to have a presence here sort of no matter what. With respect to GE, the vast majority of the state funding that was involved in that was actually investments in property that we own, that they are currently leasing. And that property is a state asset. It wasn't, we didn't write them a check. It wasn't a big tax benefit to them. It was, in fact, betterment investments in property that we own in the Seaport District that they're now occupying.
How do you feel about this?
We should not have spent $125 million to improve property in the hottest real estate district in our state for one of the wealthiest corporations in the world. And I'm glad they're here, but we need to be investing in the things that government is supposed to do well, that will provide an environment here for business investment and growth. Things like a great transportation system, an education system that is producing a workforce that is the most talented workforce in the world, affordable housing.
So do we want Amazon to come with 50,000 more jobs, everybody going 10 miles an hour, and nobody can afford an apartment or a house anymore? I mean, it'd be good if they came and we ended up like out in Washington State?
Think about our transportation system, our housing supply can't support the workforce we have. I don't know where 50,000 people are going to go. I'd be shocked if they chose to come here. And we shouldn't be giving taxpayer subsidies away to this stuff. We need to be investing in fixing the infrastructure that supports business growth. There are thousands of businesses right here in Massachusetts who make decisions every day to invest or not. They need to depend on their workforce to get to work on time. I've got a plan to do it, to raise $3 billion, to invest, to fix our transportation system much more aggressively than Governor Baker is going to do.
I want to be clear, though, whether it's Amazon or the next Amazon, as governor, would you not consider tax breaks and infrastructure support to lure a company? As your view is, we're just going to sell
I'm not saying never, maybe modest, but not $125 million. I mean, that is by far the biggest corporate tax break that we've given to anybody.
Amazon, it wasn't a tax break.
This was not a tax break. It was an investment in our own real estate.
Amazon's going to want a ton of stuff. I mean, there's some places in this country that have talked about giving them billions. What would you give them? The public's entitled to know. What would you give them?
I would not give Amazon anything.
Nothing?
No.
What would you be willing to give Amazon to get them here, the second headquarters?
I would only be interested in doing stuff that was associated with what I would call public betterments. I do think in some cases public betterments are a good investment. I mean, and we do that with some frequency.
Does that mean zero offers and tax breaks, zero tax breaks for Amazon to come here from the state?
I would only do public betterments, yeah. I mean, if you think about a lot of the investments that we make through various programs, it's typically around infrastructure and other kinds of investments that benefit more than just the business that might be interested in coming there. And those turn out to be pretty effective. I mean, for a few $1 million in investments in infrastructure, road work, utilities, and that kind of stuff, in many cases you get hundreds of millions of dollars worth of private investment alongside it. And that's the sort of thing I could see doing.
Quickly, please. Do you have something to say?
I don't oppose modest investments in infrastructure. I was a part of some of those in the Patrick administration. Nothing like $125 million. And Amazon is one of the wealthiest companies in the world. If they want to come here, it should be because of our great workforce, because of our great assets here in Massachusetts, and we shouldn't need to be spending more taxpayer money to get them here.
We're running very low on time, gentlemen. In places like Gloucester, addiction is being treated as a public health issue rather than a public safety issue. In a Nova documentary that's going to air in about an hour and 5 minutes tonight, the point is made that addiction is not a moral failing, but a brain disorder. You have, Governor, you've praised the Gloucester approach and said you hope to spread it throughout the state. Quickly and specifically, what have you done to help guarantee that there are more Gloucesters in Massachusetts?
We've worked with, there's a national organization of police addiction resource recovery organizations, and we've worked pretty hard with them to expand the Gloucester model in other places. But we've also added 1,200 treatment beds, increased state spending on addiction and recovery services by 70%, and made sure that a lot of those investments have been in places where, frankly, we didn't have a lot of capacity previously.
You know, both Republicans and Democrats, including people like Maura Healey, have praised the governor's actions on opioids. Are you amongst those who praise him? And if not, what would you do that Governor Baker has not done?
I genuinely appreciate the fact that the governor's made this a priority. This is ruining people's lives across our state. It's devastating communities. I see it everywhere. 2 of my campaign volunteers lost a son in the last 7 months. And I got to know one of the young men, and there was a point where he was wanting to get into treatment and was told he had to wait 15 days. We need to make sure when someone is in that place where they want treatment, they're able to get it. We need to be more aggressive than we're being right now. We aren't getting the results we need. We need many more treatment resources. I think we need to try bold initiatives like safe injection sites. We need to stop treating people who are addicted like criminals. And this is an area that I have experience in. At the health insurance company I worked at, the #1 health condition of our members was addiction. We attacked it aggressively, a lot of innovative initiatives. The Boston Globe named our company one of 46 game-changing companies in Massachusetts, and I'll take the same approach as governor.
Very quickly, in 45 seconds, safe injection sites. A study out of the University of Alberta says that in Vancouver, within a close radius of the safe injection site there, overdose deaths have decreased from 253 to 165 per 100,000 with no change in the mortality. You've said things like the jury is still out. The jury is in Vancouver.
The jury's not in.
These numbers don't mean anything.
No,
You're a data-driven guy.
I am a data-driven guy, and those numbers represent a small piece of what's going on in Vancouver. The overdose rate in Vancouver is almost twice per capita what it is here in the Commonwealth, even as they have continued to expand their injection site capacity.
Not near the safe injection sites.
Well, see, part of the problem with that is there's many different kinds of safe injection sites, and a lot of them operate on what I would describe as complete anonymity, and I get why they do that. But the bottom line is that it makes it really hard for them to be to be able to collect data that actually tells you the things you need to know. So I think we actually landed in the right place on that one in the second round of opioid legislation, which was to put together a commission with both supporters and skeptics and other academics and do a study on it and have people go visit a variety of different approaches to safe injection sites and figure out which versions have actually turned out to be successful.
I've got to hold you, if I
Okay.
may. We only have a minute left, and I want to end the debate with a question being debated in every house in America, including the White House. Very briefly, Colin Kaepernick, who received an honor about a mile from here at Harvard the other day, has led those NFL protests. People know that, even though he's not there now, taking a knee to protest racial injustice in the country. Quickly, starting with you, Jay, do you see what Kaepernick's been doing? And if you do, why? And if you don't, why not? Quickly,
I
if
do.
you can.
I'm grateful for him to draw attention to this. We have huge racial disparities in our country, not just in our criminal justice system, but in wealth, in income, in life expectancy, in access to health, and we need to address them. And I appreciate the fact that he is speaking out in the way he's speaking out.
Do you support what Kaepernick's done, Governor?
I support his right to do that, and I especially support a lot of the community work that he's done and a lot of the fundraising work he's done to support organizations that are working on the issues he cares about.
But you don't support his methods?
No, I do. I think his methods, but I think one of the things, everybody focuses on that, okay? And they forget about the fact that this guy has actually put a tremendous amount of time and a lot of his own resources, and he's raised money from others to invest in a lot of the programming that deals with some of the issues that Jay talked about. And I think that, in some respects, is the part that gets missed in this. This is a guy who's actually taken a huge chance to begin with, and he's paid a price for it.
He's lost his
but he's
livelihood.
also done a tremendous amount of community-based work that, generally speaking, never gets much attention.
We got to go. That's it for tonight. I want to thank you all for watching. I want to thank you, gentlemen, for being here. We asked you to hold your applause, so here's an opportunity. Please join us in thanking Governor Charlie Baker and Jay Gonzalez for joining us. Thank you both, gentlemen. Thank you. And remember, Election Day is Tuesday, November 6th.
That's right.
Less than 3 weeks from now. She's Marjorie Egan. I'm Jim Browdy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Our live coverage of Campaign 2018 will continue shortly from Newark, Delaware, where Democratic Senator Tom Carper debates his Republican challenger Rob Arlett in the race for the U.S. Senate. Over on C-SPAN 2, a debate in New Jersey's 7th Congressional District between Republican Representative Leonard Lance and his Democratic challenger, former Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, Tom Malinowski. Again, that's live on our companion network, C-SPAN 2. And later tonight, Democrat Dan McCready and Republican Mark Harris debate each other in North Carolina's 9th Congressional District. Mr. Harris defeated the district's current Congressman, Robert Pittenger, in May. Watch that tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern on C-SPAN 2. You can find all of our coverage streaming online or on the free C-SPAN radio app. With just 20 days until Election Day, C-SPAN is your primary source for Campaign 2018.
Sunday on C-SPAN's Q&A, Joel Richard Paul, professor at the University of California Hastings Law School in San Francisco, talks about his biography of Chief Justice John Marshall.
John Marshall's legacy really was obscured by a single opinion, his decision in Marbury versus Madison, that establishes the principle of judicial review. And that's what he's known for. But the fact is, John Marshall was a soldier in the Revolutionary Army. He was very important. He was the Judge Advocate General of the Army. He served at Valley Forge. He was a leading figure in the Virginia House of Delegates, and probably the indispensable man in the ratification debates, because he was the guy who really persuaded the majority of Virginian delegates to go along with ratifying the Constitution. Without Virginia, there wouldn't have been a Constitution. He was an important diplomat in negotiations with France, and he was Secretary of State. And all of those other contributions that he's made as a founding father kind of get forgotten because of the significance of his one decision in Marbury versus Madison.
Sunday night at 8 Eastern on C-SPAN's Q&A.
C-SPAN, where history unfolds daily. In 1979, C-SPAN was created as a public service by America's cable television companies. And today, we continue to bring you unfiltered coverage of Congress, the White House, the Supreme Court, and public policy events in Washington, D.C. and around the country. C-SPAN is brought to you by your cable or satellite provider.
Now we take you live to the University of Delaware for a debate between U.S. Senate candidate Rob Arlett and incumbent Senator Tom Carper.